some people call the original home of racism.
Wow.
A lot of people refer to Hinduism as sanctified racism. This question when I travel abroad, could they distinguish me from them? First of all, the hair. That you have straight to wavy hair. And it's not always black. Sometimes it's reddish and blonde. Natural. And then I figured the other part must have been the wristwatch, you know, the bracelet, the sneakers, the jeans. All of those things set me apart. And so from the very beginning, I was a real curiosity piece. I was interviewed, I think, in that city alone by 3 or 4 newspapers. And I was taken all over the city. The first day, we went to visit the Ganges River. But more important than that, on the following day, I had a chance to tour the slum areas of Patna. And this is where the untouchables live. And just to review quickly, the untouchables are those, not all the untouchables are black. And I don't want to mislead you, but most of them are. The untouchables are largely the people who built the early civilization of India and whose descendants were ultimately defeated by the Aryans, the white people, the Indo-Europeans. That's right. The first white folks to enter into India are called Aryans. The term Aryan is the epitome of white supremacy. Isn't it interesting that those animals that killed that brother in Jasper, Texas, and I live in San Antonio, which can't be that far, were members of the Aryan Brotherhood, or the Aryan Nation. So when you hear that word Aryan, that's a buzzword for white supremacy.
Right.
The Nazis consider themselves Aryans.
Right.
So the Aryans is the term Aryan is the name of the white people who invaded. They are truly barbarians. Savages in the truest sense of the word. And I'm not here to bash white people, that's not necessary. But I'm talking about savages. Had never seen a city, largely homosexual, women with few rights, children who are abandoned. They cremate the dead, but one thing about them, they are aggressive warriors, they're aggressive militarists. So they conquer all of northern India, and ultimately the whole of India, either physically or culturally, and impose a social order called Varna, V-A-R-N-A. That, in their language, means color. And this is the system that today is known as the caste system. It is originally based on color. And the more white blood you had in you, the more advanced you were. So it would be an intermediate thing. White folks, what they call the intermixed people, and then the masses of black people who had been conquered. And then outside of them, the untouchables, who themselves were black, but who were even slaves of the slaves. And just to briefly review, these people were not allowed to enter a village in the daytime. And it was thought that their shadows, the sounds of their voices, or their mere presence will cause pollution, ritual pollution, to other members of society. So they were kept on the lowest rungs of the social ladder. They were outside the social ladder. In fact, they're oftentimes called outcasts, which means outside the caste system, which basically means outside the realm of humanity. And in this state of Bihar, cows have a higher status. This is true now. Cows have a higher status than untouchables. And most of them are black. And most of them are poor. Bihar, I wanted to go to Bihar, kind of person I am, because I had always heard that Bihar was the most corrupt, backward, poorest, and oppressive part of India, where the untouchables had it the worst. So naturally, that's where I wanted to go. And they took me through these slums, and I went to 3 slum communities in the city. Lots of homeless people. The city is dirty, it stinks. You know, there are cows, there are water buffaloes, horses, chickens, donkeys, goats, and I was quite surprised to see, and dogs of course, I was quite surprised to see a lot of pigs. And the ugliest pigs you could ever imagine. I saw one at night, and I said, man, what is that? I said, that's a pig. And I said, well, should we go this way? And he said, no, he won't bother you. I used to see no pigs just wandering around at random, anywhere and everywhere, all over the city. And people are desperately poor. It is a decaying city, a very ancient city. So we toured the slums. Brothers and sisters, it was horrible. And that is too kind a word. I went in one area, 3 consecutive slum areas, one morning. And plus it's hot, close to 100 degrees, and it always makes a difference. People live tightly packed together. So you might have a hut with corrugated roofing or just thatch on top, maybe this big, and a depth of maybe here maybe slightly bigger, to the wall. And in that area, you might have 6 people living, and maybe a cow and a goat, all in there. Flies, mosquitoes. This one area held 2,000 people, and there was one well to service everybody. They did the washing, drinking water, you name it, cleaning. And I went over and took a picture of them, and it was filled with, green slime and mold on the side for 2,000 people. Everybody's barefooted, snotty nose, hair uncombed, spitting, defecating, urinating publicly. I saw one person. I said, "How old is that person?" He said, "Elder." I said, "What is he, about 70?" He said, "He's 35." So this is horrible. They took me to what they called a school, and it's really just like a bench with a side of a shed that has thatch on top. No textbooks, no notebook paper, no ink pens, no pencils, none of that. So I walked all through this, and nobody asked me for any money. Now when you go to Egypt, bakshish, it's a way of life. Begging is a way of life. People don't beg because they're hungry. It's cultural. Over there, in spite of everything that had happened to these people, I sense this time more than ever before, they still maintain their dignity. A lot of women have been forced to turn to prostitution, not to get crack cocaine, but to feed their family for one more day. So I asked the people that took me, I said, how are they viewed? Are they looked down on? I said, no. These women are doing what they have to do, and people accept that. So I was impressed by that. And then finally I was taken to another area which was even worse than the first two. And finally I said, man, I had enough. I walked past this one sister. She was sitting in a pile of garbage, sitting in it, and just a cloud of flies all over her. And she's picking through the garbage, looking for anything she could eat or use. And this is day-to-day reality. When you would leave these areas, you left with a sense of relief, but also with kind of a sense of guilt. It was like you were leaving prison. But they didn't have a key to unlock the door. No schools, no sanitation. They had these latrines that were just backed up with feces for months. You can only imagine what it's like when it really gets hot or when it rains. Because there's no drainage system. There's no electricity. There's no lights. And these other two areas didn't have a school. So they walked me through this area. And then that was it for that day. I had 2 interviews with 2 big-time newspapers, and I was just furious. And I was saying things like, how could the government allow this to happen? And they said, well, we're doing what we can. We're making great progress. And I would be just furious. And you can't eat, or it's hard to eat after that. And really, brothers and sisters, you question your faith in God. There were times when I felt like I was just in a nightmare and I couldn't wake up. You want to cry, but tears wouldn't come. So that was that. The next day it got worse. And we went to a village in a district called the Jahanabad district. And once again, a bunch of us piled together, and they're just like us. We say we're going to leave at 8, and we leave about 11. And we drive all day, and then every few minutes somebody has to stop and use the bathroom. So that was the way that trip was. And we go to this place called Jahanabad. Now, in December, 65 men, women, and children were murdered in Jahanabad. Late at night, about midnight, a private army of 300 gunmen came into this village and just shot anything and everything. I think they killed 26 children under the age of 10, 1 a 2-year-old, 1 6 months old, 1 person 80 years old. They shot everything, mostly women and children. Now the idea behind these things is to keep the dollars terrorized, keep them in a perpetual state of fear. Go in and rape all the women, shoot the men. So that, and then if you protest, who are you going to protest to? Because all the government officials, the head of the army, the head of the police, all the priests, the head of the universities, are all of the upper caste, and those are the ones who are ordering the killings. So they took me to this district, not to that specific village, but one very close to it, and these people were messed up. They were just like the Dome, except they lived in the country. The Dome are known as scavengers. They clean latrines with their hands. And I'm not talking about with gloves, with their hands. That's their job, they're scavengers. They take the filth and they put it in a bucket, and then you put the bucket on top of your head, and then you walk to the outskirts of the village and you dump it. And you can see the excrement streaming down the back. I mean, this is horrible. I called a group of them together to see if I could take a picture of them. And they ran. I pulled out my camera, they thought it was a gun. They thought I was going to shoot them. And it's almost funny, but it's tragic. I talked to one sister, she had glaucoma. And last year, she had 9 of her sons who were murdered by upper caste Hindus. And then one lady had 2 of her sons murdered. And naturally, what did I do? The American thing, can I give you some money? I had asked them. And they took it, and I finally got my pictures, and they walked me around. It was just pathetic.